There are some moments in life that remind you no matter how complicated things become between adults, children have a way of bringing everybody back to what really matters. And that is exactly the feeling surrounding Snow Sanders' second birthday. Over the weekend, Jacquees and Deiondra Sanders came together to celebrate their little boy, Snow. And for a family that has experienced plenty of public tension over the past year, this birthday gathering carried a meaning that went far beyond cake, decorations, and birthday pictures. It was about putting the grown-up issues aside, even if only for a moment, and making sure a little boy felt surrounded by love on his special day. According to BCK Online, Jacquees shared photos from the celebration on Instagram, along with an emotional message dedicated to his son. The celebration featured a Spider-Man theme, family members, birthday decorations, and a cake made especially for Snow. And when you look at that kind of scene, it's hard not to pause for a second, because 2 years ago, Snow was just a baby. Now, suddenly, he's running around, growing into his own little personality, surrounded by a family that clearly wants him to know just how loved he is. Jacquees' message to his son was especially personal. He described Snow as his twin, his biggest blessing, and made it clear that so much of what he does is motivated by his son. That sentiment is important because regardless of everything that has happened between Jacquees and Deiondra, there is one thing they will always have in common. They are Snow's parents. And when it comes to a child's birthday, sometimes that common ground matters more than anything else. Jacquees essentially acknowledged that reality when he wrote that they were putting everything aside and making the celebration about Snow. And honestly, that may be the most important part of this entire story. Not the relationship drama, not the social media conversations, not the rumors, not who said what months ago, just Snow. That is what makes this birthday feel different, because the relationship between Jacquees and Deiondra has not exactly been smooth sailing. The two were once engaged, welcomed Snow together in August of 2024, and eventually went their separate ways. Since then, their relationship has occasionally spilled into public conversations in social media. Earlier this year, Deiondra spoke openly about the relationship and reflected on how deeply she had been invested emotionally. Other public exchanges have also brought attention to disagreements surrounding their co-parenting relationship. So when you put all of that context next to these birthday pictures, the family gathering takes on a different emotional weight. Because getting to a point where everybody can stand in the same room, smile for the camera, and celebrate the child they share is not always easy, especially when there has been hurt, especially when there have been disagreements, especially when people have already said things publicly. But children don't care about the internet. They don't care about screenshots. They don't care about social media arguments. A 2-year-old just knows who makes him smile. And on his birthday, that's what matters. Snow's birthday had a Spider-Man theme, and honestly, it sounds like exactly the kind of celebration a 2-year-old would love. There was a birthday display, there was a Spider-Man cake, there were family members gathered around, and in one of the photos, Deiondra is holding Snow while wearing a red Spider-Man-inspired red outfit with white sunglasses. Jacquees is standing nearby, and the whole scene looks like a family portrait. It's one of those pictures where you can temporarily forget everything else. You just see a mother holding her son, a father standing nearby, a birthday celebration, and a little boy right in the middle of it all. That's the picture that matters. And Deiondra seemed just as excited about the birthday weekend. Before the celebration, she shared her excitement about Snow turning 2, expressing disbelief that she was already the mother of a 2-year-old. And honestly, every parent knows that feeling. One minute, you're holding a newborn, wondering how you're going to survive the sleepless nights. Then you blink, and suddenly that baby has opinions. They're running around, they're laughing, they're discovering their favorite characters, they're developing their own little personality, and you're standing there thinking, how did we get here so fast? That's the emotional side of birthdays that doesn't always show up in the pictures. A birthday isn't just about the child getting older, it's also a reminder to the parents of how much has changed. For Deiondra, the last 2 years have brought an enormous amount of change. She became a mother, navigated a difficult relationship, experienced a public breakup, and continued raising Snow while dealing with the attention that comes with being part of the Sanders family. And through it all, Snow has remained the center of her world. That's why her reaction after the birthday celebration was significant. She expressed gratitude for the people who showed up for Snow and celebrated him. That message is easy to overlook, but it says something meaningful. When you're raising a child, the people who show up matter. Not just the people who post, not just the people who comment, not just the people who say they care. The people who actually show up. The ones who come to the birthday party, the ones who take pictures, the ones who bring gifts, the ones who make the child feel special. Those are the memories a family carries. And Snow has an interesting birthday connection of his own. He shares his August 9th birthday with his grandfather, Deion Sanders. Yes, Coach Prime himself. Deion turned 59 this year, and the birthday connection gives the family another reason to celebrate. Imagine having your birthday on the exact same day as your grandfather, especially when your grandfather happens to be one of the most recognizable figures in football. That's a pretty special family coincidence. And Deion had his own message for his grandson. His post was affectionate, but it also included the kind of playful humor people have come to expect from him. He jokingly acknowledged that Deiondra had put together a major production for a 2-year-old, even teasing that Snow probably won't remember all of it. And honestly, that's classic grandparent energy. Because let's be real, grandparents will absolutely say something like that. Why are y'all doing all this? He's 2. He won't remember any of this. Meanwhile, the parents are like, I don't care. It's his birthday. And that's exactly how it feels here. Deiondra was excited. The family showed up. There was a theme. There was a cake. There were photos. And Snow got his moment. Even if he doesn't remember the Spider-Man decorations years from now, the adults around him will. And those memories become part of a family's history. That's something worth thinking about. When children are young, birthdays are really for the adults too. The child may not remember the decorations, they may not remember the cake, they may not remember exactly who was there, but their parents will remember, their grandparents will remember, their family will remember. Someone will eventually pull out those old photos and say, "Look at Snow when he was 2," and everybody will laugh. Someone will talk about what he was obsessed with at that age. Someone will remember what he wore. Someone will tell the story of what happened during the party. That's how family memories are built, one birthday at a time. And perhaps that is why the decision to come together is so important. Jacquees and Deiondra don't have to agree on everything to recognize that Snow deserves a peaceful birthday. They don't have to pretend their history never happened. They don't have to rewrite the past. They simply have to recognize that their son is bigger than the conflict between them. That's a powerful distinction, because putting something aside for a child's sake doesn't necessarily mean everything has been magically fixed. It can simply mean today isn't about us. And that seems to be the message behind this celebration. Today is about Snow. It's also important not to overread a family birthday photo. A picture of 2 people celebrating their child together does not automatically mean they're back together. It doesn't necessarily mean every disagreement has disappeared. It doesn't mean the relationship has been repaired romantically. What it does show is that, at least for this occasion, the focus was on their son. And that's something worth celebrating on its own. Because co-parenting can be complicated. Sometimes people have to figure out how to communicate after the romantic relationship is over. Sometimes they have to navigate different expectations. Sometimes the public makes things even harder because every post gets analyzed, every picture gets turned into a headline, every caption gets dissected, every interaction becomes a theory. But behind all of that, there is still a child, and Snow deserves to grow up knowing that both of his parents love him. That's why Jacquees' birthday message stands out. The words were not really about Deiondra. They weren't about their relationship. They were about Snow, his son, his blessing, his little boy. And that is probably the healthiest place for the conversation to remain. Not, are they getting back together? Not, who's right? Not, who won the breakup? But, is Snow surrounded by love? That is the question that really matters. And from the images shared from the celebration, it certainly looks like Snow had plenty of people around him. The Spider-Man theme gives the whole party a fun, playful energy. Deiondra is holding him. Jacquees is nearby. Family members are present, there's a birthday display behind them, and the cake is right there waiting for its big moment. You can almost imagine the room, people talking over each other, phones coming out, someone trying to get everybody to look at the camera, somebody probably yelling because the birthday boy is trying to move. That's what family birthday parties are like. They are rarely perfectly organized, and that's part of the charm. You can plan the decorations, you can order the cake, you can choose the theme, but you cannot control a 2-year-old, and that's what makes those birthdays so funny. Snow probably wasn't thinking about the family dynamics. He wasn't thinking about the internet. He wasn't thinking about headlines. He was just being 2. And maybe that's exactly what everybody around him needed, a reminder to slow down, a reminder to enjoy the little person standing in front of them, a reminder that life keeps moving. Because 2 years can change everything. In 2024, Snow's arrival marked the beginning of a completely new chapter for Jacquees and Deiondra. Deiondra had spoken publicly about the emotional significance of becoming a mother after facing serious fertility challenges, and Snow's birth became a deeply meaningful moment for her. Now, 2 years later, that little baby is a toddler, and his parents are looking at him from completely different places than they were when he was born. Life happened, relationships changed, people grew. Some wounds may still be healing, but Snow is here, and he is growing. That alone is worth celebrating. There's something beautiful about watching families find their way through complicated seasons. Not every family looks perfect. Not every relationship ends perfectly. Not every co-parenting situation is easy. But sometimes people can still choose to show up. Sometimes they can put their differences aside for a few hours. Sometimes they can stand next to someone they have complicated history with because their child deserves to see both parents there. And sometimes that is enough for one day. Maybe the bigger healing happens later. Maybe the conversations happen privately. Maybe the boundaries remain. Maybe things never return to what they once were. That's okay. Families don't always have to go backward. Sometimes they just have to move forward. And for Snow, moving forward can mean having birthdays where he feels surrounded by love. There's also something special about Deion Sanders becoming the grandfather in this story. Coach Prime may be known to millions of people as a football legend, a coach, a personality, a competitor, but to Snow, he's grandpa. He's the person who shares his birthday. He's the grandfather who can joke about the birthday production. He's the person who can celebrate his grandson. And those two relationships are really sweet. The public sees Deion Sanders. Snow sees Grandpa, and those are two completely different relationships. And you already know Grandpa Prime is probably going to have plenty to say as Snow gets older, because if Snow gets into football, you know the family is going to have opinions. If he plays baseball, somebody will probably have opinions. If he decides he wants to do something completely different, somebody will still have opinions. That's family. Everybody has a plan for the youngest person in the room, and then the child grows up and does whatever they want anyway. But right now, Snow is only 2, so there's plenty of time for all of that. Right now, he can enjoy Spider-Man, he can enjoy cake, he can enjoy birthday gifts, he can run around, he can laugh, he can be spoiled by his grandparents, he can be loved by his parents, and he can grow up surrounded by memories that started long before he was old enough to understand them. And maybe, years from now, Snow will look back at these pictures. He'll see his mother holding him. He'll see his father standing beside them. He'll see the Spider-Man decorations. He'll see his birthday cake. He'll see his family gathered around him. And he may not remember the complicated history that existed behind the scenes. He may not remember the social media conversations. He may not remember the arguments. But he'll see one thing. People came together for him. That's powerful, because children should never have to carry the emotional weight of adult disagreements. They deserve the freedom to love both parents. They deserve to have birthdays without worrying about who is getting along. They deserve to have family photos without wondering whether everybody will still be speaking tomorrow. And on Snow's second birthday, it seems like the adults made a choice to give him that space. For one day, it wasn't about Jacquees. It wasn't about Deiondra. It wasn't about the internet. It wasn't about the past. It was about a little boy named Snow turning 2 years old. And that is probably the sweetest part of the entire story, because life is messy, relationships are messy,
Families are messy, but love can still exist in the middle of all that mess. Sometimes love looks like a birthday cake. Sometimes it looks like showing up. Sometimes it looks like standing next to someone you have complicated history with because your child deserves to see both parents there. And sometimes it looks like saying, today we put everything else aside. And for Snow's birthday, that seems to be exactly what happened. Jacquees celebrated his son with a message full of love. Deiondra celebrated the milestone with excitement and gratitude. Family members showed up, Grandpa Deion celebrated his grandson, and for a few hours, everybody had the same reason to smile. Snow, 2 years old, 2 years of memories, 2 years of growth, 2 years of learning what it means to be a parent, a grandparent, a family member. And if there is one thing this birthday reminds us of, it's that children have a way of putting everything into perspective. Because when you look at Snow's birthday photos, the biggest story isn't the drama that happened before, it's the love that was present now. And honestly, that's a pretty beautiful birthday gift.